A reading from the Song of Songs, chapter 6, verse 11. I went down to the nut orchard to look at the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vines had budded, whether the pomegranates were in bloom. May God grant us wisdom and understanding of this passage.
Thank you, Jake, for your reading of the one passage or the one verse for our scripture and reflection today. I appreciate it very much. Rimon, or rimonim, plural, is the Hebrew word for pomegranate or pomegranates. This fruit was first cultivated in the Middle East, notably in Iran, but also Asia and around the Mediterranean. Today, you can find them grown in many parts of the world. You can even find them in ShopRite, Big Y, and Stop and Shop, as if they were native to Guilford. And if you are lucky enough, you can find them pre-peeled and de-seeded, leaving the areoles or seeds ready to eat or to use in some delicious recipe. I know that Trader Joe's has them, and probably Bishop's too. So for a cut-the-corner kind of cook that I am, this is a game changer. Pomegranates are as prolific in symbolism, religion, and art as they are in growth and consumption. From Persia's Xerxes, whose armed soldiers carried spears with an image of this luscious fruit engraved on them, to Salvador Dali's dream caused by the flight of a bee around a pomegranate a second before awakening, painted in 1944, the pomegranate as art and artifact is inexhaustible, as the areoles themselves. If you want to know more about the history of pomegranates, which is actually pretty interesting, the website Palm Wonderful Juice people, it's great. It is said that there are anywhere from 165 areoles to 1,000 areoles in a typical fall-ripened pomegranate, bringing the average to 613, give or take a few. Which is why it is traditional to consume pomegranates on Rosh Hashanah, the head of the Jewish New Year and the beginning of the high holidays. In rabbinical tradition, it is said the 613 seeds correspond to the 613 mitzvot or commands of the Torah, but that really could be midrash from the ancient rabbinical authorities. I went down to the nut orchard to look at the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vines had budded, whether the pomegranates were in bloom. Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, in the Hebrew Bible is a collection of love poetry. It's sensuous at times, erotic at times, and beautifully written in these 8 short chapters. There are lovely passages contained within the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon, attributed to King Solomon. It is a declaration of 2 lovers. In chapter 8, verse 6, we read, "Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. It flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame." And in chapter 6, 3, "I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine." These verses are often read at wedding ceremonies, perhaps erroneously because some scholars believe it to be an allegorical love sonnet between Israel and its bridegroom, which is God. And then later, as Christians began to interpret this passage as a sonnet between God and the church. Whatever the intention of the author, it's a beautiful piece of literature, except that there is one curious, very curious point that is noteworthy. Can you guess what it is? Upon a closer reading, one notices that there is no religious piety, no moral instruction, no presence or absence of justice. It never mentions Israel as a nation or its covenantal relationship with God. In fact, God is not even mentioned, not even one little shout out or hey. How then, in the world, did the Song of Songs make it into Holy Writ? Some say the song was accepted into the Jewish canon of Scripture in the 2nd century CE, after a period of controversy in the 1st century. It was accepted as canonical because it is supposed authorship by King Solomon and all that love language. He would know, if anyone, seeing that he had 700 wives, 300 concubines, and there was that little dalliance with the Queen of Sheba. But really, authorship is unclear and unknown. So if God isn't mentioned in the Song of Songs, what are we to do with this in a religious service, our beloved Sunday morning worship? What are we to do with this one little verse from the song? So we'll think about pomegranates because that is the word that shimmered for me after reading this one verse over and over and over again. Typically, pomegranates are symbolic of fertility, abundance, and fruitfulness because of its numerous seeds, 613 of them strong. So today I want to really think with you about abundance. What is it? And what does it mean for your living? Because abundance is just not a cornucopia filled to the brim with ripe vegetables as we like to imagine and celebrate at Thanksgiving. It is so much more. Abundance, more than enough, plentiful amount, in rich supply, copious quantity, seeing endless potential and possibility. This is how abundance is described. When we think about abundance, perhaps we think about having it all and then some. A house here in addition to a second home there. Friends too many to count on two hands. A fridge upstairs and an additional freezer downstairs. A storage bin filled with the items we can't fit in our homes. I think you'd call all of this an abundance of goods and perhaps even abundant life. Then we can have abundant gardens, beautiful as they can be, and markets filled with the abundance of food that's fresh and so inviting. And it's all good. But we also need to understand what abundance is not. It's not the more I have, the better. It doesn't give you a quality of life. It's far from that. There is a danger to a mindset that claims that more is better. And I think we have seen that in this past year when at the store, the paper product aisles and the cleanser aisles and the meat counters were just depleted. Not one little square of toilet paper was to be found anywhere. People acted out of scarcity and hoarded such products so that their living could be secure and perhaps abundant within the structure and within the confines of the pandemic lockdown. It skewed our thinking and what abundant living really means. How does one live a life of abundance when in the midst of trauma, pain, and suffering? What will it take from us to adopt an abundance mindset that honors God and our souls, not a scarcity mindset that is self-focused and harmful to others? In his poem, The Wild Geese, poet and author Wendell Berry ends his poem with the line, "What we have is here." He speaks of riding on horseback on a Sunday morning, noticing everything from the fields to the names of those who went west and those whose names grace the stones of a grave, from opening a persimmon seed to find the tree that stands in promise. Geese appear overhead, and then the sky closes and the geese disappear. He asserts that what we need is here. What we have, all that we have, is right here before us. God provides so much for us to see and experience right here, right before our very eyes. Poet Emily Dickinson lived much of her life in isolation, and yet she was a prolific writer. She noticed, she saw, she explored what was within her small little realm, her hub of existence, and then she wrote. And she left a legacy of abundant thought, beautiful poems throughout her body of work. The abundance that we can glean from this passage, from those 613 seeds, is growth and acceptance of what you have. It's being present to the abundance of the things, the beauty, the people in front of you, and then appreciating that moment for what it is and how it adds benediction to your life. I will end this sermon with a deeply moving piece of music composed by Aaron Copeland. It is an expression of deep gratitude for the harvest from a providential God. The Promise of Living is from Copland's opera entitled The Tender Land, written around 1952. Copeland was moved and inspired to write this music after he had seen photos by Walker Evans, who documented the Great Depression in poignant, heartbreaking black and white photography, similar to Dorothea Lange. Now, Lange's image, entitled Migrant Mother, is a black and white photo of a woman flanked by two children. Her hair is tied back and the furrows in her forehead are deep from the work and the worry. She looks off in the distance, her right hand cups her chin, and her children, with their unkept hair, face the other direction as if to hide their faces, but tenderly rest their heads on her shoulders. You would recognize this if you saw it. So too, Walker photographed despondent adults with empty eyes, dilapidated wooden porches, the blank faces of children, and the desperate looks on the faces of migrant workers. Evans depicted the horrors of the Depression that it had, particularly on the men and women who already were downcast and had practically nothing. Copeland saw these photographs and was stirred and motivated by them to compose his opera, The Tender Land. The libretto was written by Horace Everett. Set in the Midwest in the 1930s, the farmland folks and migrant workers were hit the hardest. Yet the Moss family of the opera finds great thanksgiving for the spring harvest in the middle of the adversities of their lives. The people are giving thanks because God, the source of all things, has been so good to them, and that they can share their abundance with their neighbors. They have an abundant spring harvest and are living, working, growing, loving, and sharing all of this with their friends. They were thankful for what they had, which really wasn't much, and for being able to share the plentiful crops with their neighbors. This is grace and gratitude. This is the stuff of pomegranates and abundance. Let their prayer be our prayer to this day. Give thanks there was sunshine. Give thanks there was rain. Give thanks, we have hands to deliver the grain. Oh, let us be joyful. Oh, let us be grateful to the Lord for his blessing.